morning. We're going to start Access now. Um, Access is Microsoft's answer to a user-friendly relational database environment. This is the point that I expect people to start having a lot more questions. I'm hoping, having gone through Excel first, you will see this a little bit more clearly than in previous semesters when we've done Access first. Access takes basically an Excel spreadsheet and takes it to the next level. When we started talking about tables in Excel, that's a lot of what Access does. Is it takes, in tables in Excel, everything in a row was related. Okay, Access does the same thing. When you have a table, that's all related data. But in addition, Access allows you to relate tables together to store different information in a relationship. And then it allows you to do queries where you can query one thing or two things or three things and have only specific information displayed. And so this is what we're going to be going through for the remainder of the semester up until the last couple of weeks. And then we're going to work on actually integrating Excel, Access, and Word to work all together. So we're going to start with Access Module 1. And we're going to do the In Class Project. So go into SAM and download the In Class Project. When you open it, be sure you enable the content. And then double check you've got this table that's called underscore grading info table. If you double click on that, it will open up, and make sure your first name and last name is in here. Do not touch anything in this table. Just verify that your name is there. You don't need to look at anything else. You don't need to do anything else. If your name's not there, close the file and re-download it from SAM. Beyond that, once you have looked at it, come over here to the right-hand side, and this X here will close the table. It will not close the file. It will close the table. Okay, and then let's get started. I am going to try to use my annotation tools as much as I can remember, since we are trying to get familiar with now this new application environment. So be patient with me as I pull up those tools. Okay, step number 1, create a new table in Datasheet view. Save the table as patient. Okay, so get my little box here. We're going to go over here to this Create tab, and that's where we're going to actually be able to create a new table. You can also right-click and, well, nope, it's not going to let me create a new table there. So we're going to go to Create, and we've got a table here, Table Design, or SharePoint Lists. So we want to create a table. That's what is Datasheet view. Let me explain, or let me show you the different tables. Let's look at this therapist table that's already created for us. Again, if you double click it, it will open the table. When you open it up and you look at it this way, this is what's called Datasheet view. We are looking at it in Datasheet view. So it looks very similar to a spreadsheet. It's columns and rows. Okay. And the other views that you have on your Home tab, you have Design view. So if you click on Design view, it comes up like this, and this is where you would define your fields and then what type of data type they are. And we'll get to that shortly. I just want you to see what the different views are. So I'm going to close this therapist table because we don't want it open right now. And we're going to come over here and we're going to click this tab or this button, whatever you want to call it, this menu option that's for table. And it creates a table in Datasheet View. You'll see it opens up in Datasheet View. We're going to come over here to the right hand side and click on where it says Table 1. You can also right click on the tab here, either place, and click Save, and it's going to say, okay, what do you want to name the table? They want us to name it Patient. So I'm going to name it Patient. Say okay. Then we want to change the name of the ID field in the patient table to Patient ID. So right here you see it says Patient ID. If you right click on it, here's Rename Field. And that's what we want, Rename Field. And we want it to be Patient ID. Now, one thing, again, just as in Access, but Excel, or just as in Excel, but Access is even more stringent. Make sure you double check your typing, okay? If there's not a space in the field name, don't put a space. If it's a capital letter, put a capital letter. If it's a lowercase letter, put a lowercase letter. So this is Patient ID with a capital I, a capital D, and no space. So make sure that you do that. Okay, so we hit enter there. And then we're going to right click on this. I'm sorry. Okay. Step 3 is we want to change the data type of the patient ID field to short text. Okay, so there's a couple of places you can do it, but we're going to do it up here for right now. Up here under your table tools, you have fields and you have table. Right now we're under table, which gives us properties and events and macros and stuff. And most of those things we really don't want to do anything with right now. What we do want is fields. So we're going to click on fields. And just like in Excel, you have your data types and your formatting. And this is where we're going to, for right now, change our data types. So make sure your patient ID field is highlighted. And you're going to come up here, data type, it should say auto number. You're going to change that to say short text. And that's step 3. Step 4, create the following fields in the patient table using the short text data type. So where it says click to add, we're going to do just that. So we're going to down click, we're going to click that arrow, and we're going to choose short text. And that name is first name. Make sure there's no spaces. Then we're going to add another short text field, and it's going to be last name. Another short text field, address, short text, city, state, and zip. Okay, so we've got all our fields created. They're all short text, and that is step 4. Step 5 is enter the records shown in Table 1 below into the patient table. Okay, so we got a patient ID of A10026, first name of Al, last name Pandola, address 45 South Main Street. Make sure you spell out South on that. Akron, Ohio 44307. And if you hit the tab, it will go, or enter, either one, it's going to go down to the next line. When you start typing again, it's going to insert another line. So okay, so we have our 2 lines entered. That was step 5. Step 6, resize the address field to best fit the data it contains. Save and close the patient table. Okay, best fit is just like in Excel. If you hover between your 2 lines, double click, and it will best fit it. And then if you hit your X over here in the very far right hand side, it's going to come up and says, do you want to save the changes to the layout? You say yes, and it closes the table. Okay, step 7, open therapist table in data sheet view, and then change the name of the ID field to therapist ID. So I'm going to double click and open it up in data sheet view. I'm going to right click on ID and say rename field and therapist ID. Again, no space. Change the data type of the therapist ID field to short text. So back up here under table tools and fields, we're going to change it to short text. Change the date type of the hire date field. So let's come over here to hire date, and we're going to change the data type to be date time. That was step 9. And then step 10, enter the records shown in table 2 into the therapist table. Okay, so we got our data put in there. And that was step 10. Step 11. Jennifer created a database named support_NP_staff that contains a table with additional therapist data. The therapist table you just edited is the same design as the employee table in that database. Copy the records from the employee table in the support staff database and paste them at the end of the therapist table in the current database. Okay, so this is the support file that you should have downloaded from Sam. And I'm going to open it up. I'm doing it off screen right now, so you can't see exactly what I'm doing. But here is my directory here, and here is that support database that it was talking about. So I'm going to open that up, enable your content, and it said in the employee table. So I'm going to go into the employee table, and if I take and I highlight all the fields, I can highlight all of them and then say copy. And then come over here to my therapist field and say paste. And it comes up and says, you are about to paste 9 records. Are you sure you want to do this? Yes, I'm sure I want to do it. And so you say yes. And as you can see, there are 9 records here, and it copied 9 records, so we're good to go. I'm going to close the support database because we don't need it anymore. We just wanted to copy those files. Okay, so that was step 11. Step 12. Resize the specialty column in the therapist database or data sheet to best fit the data. So this field here, hover in between the two, double click, and it best fits. Okay, that was step 12. Step 13. Use the simple query wizard to create a query based on the therapist table. Include the first name, last name, and specialty fields from the therapist table in the query in that order. Name the query, specialties, and then close it. Okay, so we're going to create a new query. So we're going to come up here to our Create tab, and you've got Query Wizard and Query Design. Query Wizard, Query Design. We want the Query Wizard. Don't worry about the Query Design right now. We want the wizard. So let's click the wizard, and we want to use the simple query wizard. So we click OK. And it comes up, we want the therapist table. So we're good there. We got therapist ID. Okay, so it says include the first name, last name, and specialty fields from the therapy table or the therapist table. So here's first name, last name, and specialty. You can click first name and click this arrow, and it'll move it over into the selected fields. You can also just double click and it will move it over. We want first name, last name, and specialty in that order. Make sure they're in that order. Say next. Then we're going to name it specialties. And then we're going to keep this default open the query to view information and say finish. And so there's our queries. It opened it up for us, and it doesn't want us to do anything to it except for close it. So I'm going to close it. And then we are also going to close the therapist table and say, yes, we want to save that. Yes. Okay. Step 14. We're going to use the form tool to create a form based on the therapist table. Save the form as therapist info. So again, we've got your basic forms. Here's your different form options. And we're just going to choose form. Make sure therapist table is selected here. Say form. And voila, just like that, you have a form. It's a very basic form, but it's a form nonetheless. Okay. Forms also have different views. So do queries, but forms have different views. If you click this view button, you've got form view, layout view, and design view. It wants us, first of all, we're going to save this and save it as therapist info. And say OK. Again, no spaces in that name. In form view, so click the down arrow and click form view. Use the navigation buttons for the therapist form to navigate to the third record for therapist ID 409. Okay, your navigation buttons are down in the bottom here where it says record 1 of 11. We want that to say record 3 of 11. So I'm going to hit this arrow twice, and now we're at record 3 of 11, and you'll see it as Therapist ID 409. And we're going to change the certification field value to DPT. Okay, then we're going to navigate to the last record and then change the specialty field value to running related. So if you look here, this one goes to your next record, this one goes to the last record. So that's you can quickly go to the last record by clicking this arrow with the line at the end of it. So I'm going to do that, and it's Therapist 702, so just verify we've got the right one, and we do. And this specialty is going to change to running related. And then it wants us to navigate back to the first record. So the arrows on the other side work exactly the same way. This goes back one record. This one goes back all the way to the beginning. So we're going to go all the way to the beginning. We did that, and we're going to close our form. And if you look back in the therapist table, you'll see that data changed. When we inputted it, it was headaches. And when we changed it, now it's running related. So that form is directly tied to this table. So when we change something in this form, we change it in this table. Okay, step 17. Use the report tool to create a report based on the therapist table. Save the report as therapist list. Okay, our create tab. And again, here's our create reports, and that's what we're going to use. So we're going to create a basic report, and there's our basic report. And we are going to right click on therapist and say save, and report name is therapist list, and say okay. Now if you get something up here that's not therapist, then delete that report and make sure your therapist table is selected. As if you've got the patient table selected, it's going to do a report based on the patient table, and that's not what we want. Okay, next we're going to go to layout view, which is where we already are. So we're in layout view. And use the mouse to reduce the width of the therapist ID column so that it is approximately as wide as the text therapist ID in the column heading. So if you hover over the end, you'll see that your arrow changes to the left and right. If you click and then drag in, you want it to be about the same width as what therapist ID says. And if you'll notice, I put it in that D starts to kind of disappear, so I'm going to make it a little bit wider just so that Sam grades it okay. And then it says select the text box that appears below the therapist ID column that contains the number 11 right here. Then use the mouse to resize the height of that text box slightly so that it is tall enough to completely display the value. So I'm just going to raise it just a hair, and now it completely shows the value. Then it says that it should look like figure 1 on the next page. Make sure that yours does, and mine does. So I'm going to close this and save it. And sorry, I didn't want to close it. I wanted to keep it open. I wanted to save it. So I've got it closed, or I saved it rather. it wants you to close the navigation pane. This is your navigation pane right here. This is your navigation pane. It allows you to navigate between tables, queries, forms, and reports. Okay, so if you hit this arrow over here, this double arrow, it closes it. And then you see, select the text box that appears below the specialty and certification columns, and that contains the text page 1 of 1. So I'm going to select that box right there. Use an arrow key to move the text box to the left so that its left edge vertically aligns with the left edge of the specialty column above it. So we want our left edge to align with the left edge of the specialty column. So it should align right here. And I just used my arrow keys to do that. On my keyboard, you can click and move it, but since we only want to move it left and right, we don't want to move it up and down, it's going to be much more accurate if you use your arrow keys. And then it says, view the first page of the report in print preview to view the changes you made, and then view the next page of the report in print preview. Okay, so view, and we're going to do print preview. So there's page 1. And if we go to the next page, there's page 2. And if you look down at the very bottom, there's your page 1 of 1. Okay, and it says to save and close the report. So I'm going to close it. If you when you hit this X up here, and make sure you're hitting the correct X. Make sure you're hitting this one here. If you hit this one up here at the very top, you're going to close down access entirely, and that's not what we want to do. So make sure you're doing this one right here. But when you click that X, if there's any changes that need to be saved, it's going to come up and say, do you want to save the changes? And you say yes. And it just saves a step from having to right click and say save and then close it in addition. Once you've done that, you close and save any open database objects, compact and repair your database. How do you do that? Okay, we're going to go to the File tab, and under Info is Compact and Repair. So we're going to click that, and it's going to compact it and repair it, and then exit access. And once you exit access, you're done. You can submit your file to Sam, and we're done with tutorial 1. And you can do the at-home project, and then I will see you next time for Access tutorial 2. Have a good day.